Welcome to the 23rd episode of the One Shot Effect podcast. Today's episode features Dr. Aron D'Souza, the president of the Enhanced Games, a groundbreaking movement aiming to redefine sports by embracing human enhancement. Aron is a seasoned entrepreneur and lawyer known for his role in Peter Thiel's case against Gawker Media, and as the founder of Surgon, this tech company managed over 52 billion Australian dollars in assets. In this episode, we'll dive into the Enhanced Games' recent milestones, including the ratification of the Declaration on Human Enhancement, and explore Aron's vision for the future of human potential and the evolution of sports. Welcome, Aron.
Hey, Felix, thanks for having me on the show.
It's been an exciting few months for the Enhanced Games. Could you share some of the major milestones, like the ratification of the Declaration on Human Enhancement at Oxford in December? How has this declaration shaped your vision for the movement?
Ultimately, we are building not just a new sporting event, but we are building an entire movement. Our stated objective at the Enhanced Games is not to break world records. It's not to host the next Olympics. It's to build superhumanity. And so ultimately, we recognized last year that we need a philosophical and legal structure for embarking on such an extraordinary journey. And as a consequence, we convened our scientific commission to introspect on how we could philosophically govern human enhancement. And so it begins with the first fundamental right, which is the right to bodily sovereignty. And that ultimately, as human beings, our most basic human right is our right to govern ourselves physically. And this is quite a novel concept because the idea that an individual owns their own body is actually a relatively new idea. At some point in the Middle Ages, you would say, well, God owns your body. At some point in history, you would say the man owns the body of his wife and of his children. The pater familias in Roman law. But in this modern era, I think it's unequivocal that we as individual human beings own our body, and therefore we should be able to do to our bodies what we wish. We should be able to enhance them if we wish. And that comes with rights, and that also comes with obligations. And so it was very exciting to go through this deliberative process with some of the greatest scientific minds in the world. And we met in Oxford, really as the founding fathers of the Enhanced movement, to adopt the first declaration on human enhancement in December, which sets the framework for how we're going to move forward in bringing the games to life.
So exciting. And how did you connect with all the people that ended up writing this declaration?
This is the magic of social media today. I always say that Enhanced Games is an idea that really millions of people had. And some of them were just guys chatting in the pub saying, what if there were an Olympics on steroids? Some were sophisticated individuals like Professor Julian Savulescu, who's a professor of bioethics at Oxford and the National University of Singapore, who more than 20 years ago published a paper arguing for an enhanced Olympic Games. But why have we been able to achieve what we have today? It's because of the magic of social media. There are millions of people like yourself and probably like many of your listeners who are interested in what we are doing. Before social media, we could have never found that. But with the magic of social media, they found us. And we've built a really strong community of athletes, scientists, officials who see the potential of what we're doing to reform the world of international sports and to advance the human species.
Would you say going on Joe Rogan's podcast was one of your biggest boosts in publicity?
That's a great question. So we've had over 6,000 media articles. We've been covered in the New York Times, the Financial Times, the Guardian, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, every publication you can imagine. I've done CNBC, I've done Fox, I've done hundreds of radio slots, like you can imagine, dozens of podcasts. But my advice to any entrepreneur is that the world is dominated not by the legacy media, it's dominated by the new media today. And so a podcaster like Joe Rogan has had more impact on the trajectory of our business than 10 New York Times articles. Although, like my father, who's 75 years old, he reads the New York Times. He doesn't even know who Joe Rogan is. But the reality is that a younger generation whose world is dominated by the smartphone gets their content from podcasters and trusts them a lot more than the traditional media. And as a consequence of going on Joe Rogan, we've had heads of state, kings and presidents reach out to us, expressing interest in the Enhanced Games. It's really kind of extraordinary the way the world works today.
Yeah, it really is incredible, like what social media can do. And has it all been tactical? Like, I mean, your enthusiasm to go on the radio, to be in all these mediums, and for me the biggest thing is to reach people where they are. Some people only use TikTok, some people only use Snapchat, and it's like realizing that and reaching people where they are. But how tactical is that, and like who are you trying to reach?
What is deeply surprising is the amount of brand recognition that we have. Almost everyone I meet knows about the Enhanced Games. They've heard about us somewhere. It's sort of deeply surprising that, we started just this with like this little idea, right? It was just an idea. And then, I took that idea, I wrote a set of, PowerPoint slides and a business plan. And then I built a website. I started a Twitter. I hired a couple of people. Then we raised, that got a lot of attention. And then, the biggest investors in the world, like Peter Thiel, Christian Angermeyer, Balaji Srinivasan, decided to invest in us. And now we have a real team. And so I always say that social change only happens when someone puts a suit and tie on and goes to work every day trying to solve a problem. And so in the entire history of sports, despite the fact that performance enhancements have been everywhere, no one has ever rented an office and hired a team and said, every day I'm going to go to work and make human enhancements normalized, right? And I really truly believe in professionalization. So I don't encourage anyone to do anything casually. If you're going to be a podcaster, be a podcaster, right? Go and do it with intentionality and do it every day. And so, you're on your 23rd episode now, Felix. That's great, because 90% of podcasters don't even reach their 10th episode. Real success only comes after doing your 100th episode. And in the same way here, there have been lots of ups, right? And they're very public, being on Joe Rogan, being the double full page spread in the New York Times, getting investment from the biggest investors in the world, signing amazing athletes. But there's lots of downs too. Some days you wake up and you say, oh, we planned all this out and it's not working. But that's part of the journey. And that's part of the exhilaration and the fun of it. I had a very successful career as a venture capitalist. I'm 39 years old. I could be retired today. And the reason I'm not driving the Ferrari that's in my garage is because I come to work every day for 12 to 14 hours and work with the most extraordinary group of people on a mission that is deeply important to me and that resonates with a great many people. And that's a very fulfilling life.
100%. How did you first stumble upon Enhanced Games yourself, or such a problem worth solving, right? I mean, as entrepreneurs, we solve problems, but what's the difference between this kind of problem and like your previous work?
That's a great question. So, my previous businesses, I always aspired to be boring, to do things that other people didn't want to do, low competition fields. Like, Sargon was a pension fund administration and compliance platform. Yes, we managed $52 billion in assets and had 200 employees, but it really wasn't that interesting a company. And I've actually really learned, it was economically a very successful business, but no one who worked at Sargon, including myself, will go to their grave and put on their tombstone, I worked at Sargon, right? No one's going to put on their grave, I was a product manager at Microsoft, right? Um, and instead, I often think, if I'm going to be able to recruit the most talented people in the world to work for me, which is really the only thing a company is, I have to have a mission that is deeply motivating to people. And so, you can walk around many cemeteries around the world, probably almost every cemetery, and you will see the Olympic rings on people's tombstones, right? It is the crowning achievement of their lives, not to win a gold medal, but even just to go to the Olympic Games. And I have no doubt that in due course, many people will have the enhanced cross on their tombstones, because that it will be the crowning achievement of their lives to have participated in building this movement, or even participated in winning at the games. And there's something very powerful about having a mission that is so motivating that the most talented people in the world who don't need to work actually want to work for an organization.
What a privilege. That's so inspiring, man. How do
It's
you?
actually it's very simple, right? People
Hmm,
say to me, how are you going to recruit athletes? It's like, that's not my job. My job is to find the best athlete recruiter in the world, and convince him or her to work for me. And the best track athlete recruiter in the world is named Tim Phelan. He was the head of track recruiting at Nike for more than a decade, and now he works for the Enhanced Games. Or people say it's so hard to put on an Olympic scale major event. How you, Aron D'Souza, with no experience, are going to do that? Well, the best person in the world to do that, his name is Rick Adams. He was the chef de mission of Team USA at 3 Olympic Games, and now he works for us. Um, and so it's so rewarding to know, and so validating of our trajectory, that people who work for our competitors, in the most senior roles, are willing to leave those jobs, come join a startup that is trying to change the world, because we benefit from all their knowledge and experience, and we take what is best from their history and leave behind the relics of the past as we build something new and better.
yeah, that's such an awesome opportunity. And I mean, it's really even just the journey of knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses, like knowing what you're good at, and even you like knowing where you need to spend your time.
Yeah,
How?
as a president, I only do three things. And building a great organization is very simple. Number one, as we've talked about, I need to recruit not just good people, but the best people in the world to work for this movement. Number two, I need to create a system of incentives so that they stay, retention. And number three, and this is the hardest part, is to build a culture of excellence where those all stars will work together in a collaborative way. So we have the best people in the world, and they want to stay on the team, and they work together as a team. We will change the world. And so my job is not to organize the Enhanced Games. My job isn't to recruit corporate sponsors. My job isn't to um, administer our finances. We have teams of people who do that. And my job is merely to bring those people together and make them a team, right? It's like coaching. It sounds very simple, but it is remarkably difficult. And the evidence is borne out. If you look at the NBA, you would think in the All-Star game, the best players from all the teams get together, they should score more points. But actually, they don't. And the All-Star game is actually a lower scoring match than a traditional NBA game, because the players don't know how to work as a team. It's very hard to manage a team of all-stars. And building that culture of excellence, the third dimension of building an organization, is the hardest thing. And that's something that has taken 20 years of experience, knowing what works and what doesn't work. And the organizational culture is a buzzword that's often used by CEOs and HR managers. And it doesn't mean having a ping pong table in the office. It means how we work and how we are disciplined in what we do. And That's why the organization of Netflix is very different from the organization of Blockbuster. And that culture won, and Blockbuster lost. And I think if you look at the International Olympic Committee, they're a very political organization. It's in their name. It's a committee. Decisions are made by committee. And therefore, it's very slow moving, very politicized, very bureaucratic. Versus, I'm the ultimate decision maker, and I empower my executives to make decisions. And therefore, we move much quicker. And I don't think this is going to be like Uber versus the taxi cabs. They both kind of do the same thing. It's actually like a Waymo self-driving car. We're the future, right? Okay, a self-driving Waymo um, gets you from point A to point B just like a taxi cab, but it's a completely different experience. And the taxi companies couldn't ever dream to manufacture a product like a Waymo. It's not even their skill set. Even the people who work there don't even have the capacity to dream up what a self-driving car would be. And that's exactly what the Enhanced Games is. The Olympics, it's a nice thing. It's going to continue to exist, but consumers, athletes, and sponsors will look at the Enhanced Games and say, that's the future. Because that's what we're aiming to build, a science-first, technology-driven organization that's very different from the political nationalism of the Olympics.
I mean, really just giving that full sovereignty to your athletes in itself, right?
That's right. And athletes need to be treated like human beings with rights and privileges and duties and obligations. And the problem about the Olympics is that it first begins as a concept of nations competing against each other, and it is a political competition. And I don't think that's the era that we live in anymore. And I always say we are building the third Olympiad. So the first Olympics were in ancient Greece, and they were men only competing naked in a pagan celebration. And then that was reinvented in 1896 by a French aristocrat for his era, an era of the steamship, an era of empire, an era of political nationalism. And that still exists today. And even without competition, the Olympics have struggled. They're struggling to find host cities. They're struggling to sell sponsorships. And there are fewer and fewer cities that want to host this very expensive festival of sport. And so just like Baron Pierre de Coubertin did in 1896, I am reinventing the Olympics once again for a new era, an era of science and of technology. And I hope that my lasting gift to humanity is not breaking world records at Enhanced Games or merely building a successful organization. But it's to usher in a whole new era of human history. We had the Bronze Age, we had the Steel Age, we had the Industrial Age. We are in an information age now. And I hope that the first Enhanced Games will be seen as the beginning of the Enhanced Age, where using science, technology, artificial intelligence, advanced manufacturing, we can be much more than our biology. And this will be a whole new era of human existence.
And we are so excited for it. And what is next? And what is the timeline, if there is?
So, in the next 6 months, you will see the first exhibition events of the Enhanced Games. So we have athletes currently in training all over the world who are assigned to us or who are preparing to break world records. So it's very exciting. We're keeping the exact details under wraps until the events have happened. But there will be exhibition events happening throughout this year, demonstrating that athletes of many capabilities and ages can reach levels that have never been seen before. And we look forward also to announcing in the next few weeks a major investments and state partnerships, and in due course, the announcement of our first host city for the Games. We've had a comprehensive global bidding process, and we're just at the very tail end of signing agreements with host cities and venues. And given we're moving into a whole new era now of politics, particularly in the United States, under the leadership of President Trump, who is himself a controversial, thought-provoking disruptor, um, and the leadership of people like Robert F. Kennedy in the Department of Health and Human Services, we see great possibility, particularly in the United States.
Exciting times. I even think I saw money on the line for breaking records.
Yeah, so $1 million for breaking the first world records. So, the average Olympian earns less than $30,000 a year. And, I very much look forward to handing out many $1 million checks this year as a demonstration of what the enhanced movement is capable of. And this is actually a very important dynamic, which I talk about on podcasts, but I don't think the Olympics understand, is that if the enhanced games, if the fastest athletes in the world are the enhanced games, why would any athlete want to be in the lesser competition, a slower competition? As human beings and as athletes, we only want to be competing with the best, right? And that's why the Olympics are so special. No one cares about the Asian Games or the Commonwealth Games or, the Middle Eastern Games. They just want to be world champions. They want to be the best in human history. And if the Olympics stay the course that they are on, which I don't expect that they will change, it will be a second-class competition. It will be the old, slow, amateur Olympics versus the fast, modern, paid enhanced games. And that's only a couple of world records. It's the 50 freestyle in the pool, the mile, the marathon, the 100-meter on the track. And if we have those, who's going to want to compete at the old slow Olympics?
100%. And even, I mean, for me, the most exciting part is all the research, all the data. And I mean, there has been so much data before, but it hasn't been publicized or been useful to everybody, right?
That's right. That's right. So ultimately, because 44% of Olympians admit to using banned substances, according to research funded by the World Anti-Doping Agency and the International Olympic Committee, yet only 1% get caught. But all these people are doing it in secret. They're not openly discussing their protocols. They're not sharing information. They're not engaging in peer-reviewed scientific research. And that's why at the core of what we do has always been to be a very rigorous scientific project. And at the very outset, we convened a top-class scientific advisory board, including people like George Church, who's a professor of genetics at Harvard University. We have people like Professor Dr. Kita Piles, who is the top doctor for the FIFA World Cup. And scientific research has always been the backbone of what we do, because ultimately we see our greatest economic opportunity is not selling tickets or sponsorships. It's to develop the next generation human enhancement drugs that make us all faster and stronger and younger for longer. And if we look at compounds like Ozempic accounts for 2/3 of the economic growth of the country of Denmark and has added more to the market capitalization of Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly than all of the artificial intelligence startups put together. So one human enhancement drug is worth more than AI. So get that around your head about how big this market is. And we are front and center in that.
Yeah. This feels so cutting edge and exciting. Even with, like, I've followed Brian Johnson for quite a while, and it's like his kind of case versus like an athlete. I'm kind of curious, like, even yourself, what has kind of been your learnings on enhancements in a personal capacity versus an athlete capacity?
Well, that's a great question. So Brian is a great friend of the Enhanced movement and has been a supporter of ours since day one. And we are very supportive of what he's doing. However, for Brian to be proved correct, that he can truly reverse his aging, and he will need to be the longest living human ever, right? And that's going to take more than 120 years to accomplish. So Brian's got 80 plus years to prove himself correct. For us to prove ourselves correct, we have to have an athlete break Usain Bolt's 100-meter world record or the 50 freestyle world record. So it will take 10 seconds. It will fit into a TikTok, and that's the difference. And so the verifiability of the claim is much more demonstrable. I really admire what Brian's doing. Like, his thought leadership is absolutely amazing. He participated. He's a signatory of the first Declaration on Human Enhancement. He really understands the cultural motivations of giving the world something to believe in, right? That this is the first time in history, truly, that people alive today may be immortal, right? My grandmother passed away recently. She was 97 years old. She was born in an era just after the first human beings flew in an airplane. And, she witnessed a man land on the moon, flew in a jumbo jet, used a smartphone, and at her birth, even computers weren't invented in the modern sense. So, our people who are our children today probably will live in an era where death is conquered, where aging is conquered. And this is really just about a cultural change. Like, artificial intelligence. Oh, actually, here's a great statistic. So I was studying this about how long it takes to go from science fiction to reality. So Jules Verne was the first author who proposed that man could go to the moon. And he wrote that book in the mid 1860s. And so it was about 90 years from the time he wrote that book to man actually landing on the moon, right? The idea of the smartphone only came to be really in the 1980s, right? To have like a supercomputer in your pocket, Inspector Gadget was like an example of like the first like smartphone laptops, right? So that's about 40 years from fiction to reality. Artificial intelligence, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick in the 1970s. HAL, Siri, it takes about 40 or 50 years. So in the same idea of like human enhancement, it's been prophesized by science fiction for quite a while now. TV shows like The Boys or X-Men prophesize a transhumanist future. And we are at that precipice. So I don't think it's going to be 100 years. I think it's going to be more like 50. And maybe we're sort of like midway through the cycle already. And as an alignment of government policy, scientific research, I think it's all entirely possible.
100%. I want to thank you again so much for your time. I do want to honor your time constraint, but it has been such an incredible honor to speak to you and so excited to see how things progress. And I was just another extra point. I definitely could even see people traveling for the games and then maybe even enhancement tourism with different legalities in different countries surrounding enhancement.
Absolutely. And we have been in discussions with many countries about this because um, technology ecosystems are very durable. So San Francisco is the capital of AI. It will always be the capital of AI. New York is the capital of finance. LA is the capital of film. And so the question for public policymakers is, where will the capital of human enhancement be? It's clearly a multi-trillion-dollar industry that will be one of the defining industries of the 21st century. And I can tell you where this is going to be. I can tell you where it's not going to be. It's not going to be in Europe, right? In Europe, you have all of these fossilized anti-technology, almost Luddite governments that are unwilling to even consider the possibility of how technology can advance humanity. In the United States and in the Middle East, you have governments who are very pro-technology. in particular with the election of President Trump, we have a pro-technology government in place. And so I see Europe, again, like they lost artificial intelligence, losing out on the human enhancement ecosystem, and it either being headquartered in the US or in the Middle East.
Exciting.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show, Felix. And if you ever make it out to London or New York, let us know.
100%. I would love to see what facilities you guys have by that point.
As well, I actually have some facilities contracts on my desk at the moment. So, we're definitely building. So great to meet you. And thanks for having me on the show.
Cheers. Thank you.
Okay.